Welcome to the Newburyport Literary Festival. We hope you've enjoyed our event so far today. Be sure to check the schedule on the Newburyport Literary Festival website for tomorrow's events and for this evening's event. I have a special interest in this evening's event. My name is Alfred Nicole, and I'll be your host for this afternoon's poetry event. We're using Zoom webinar. We encourage you to use the chat window throughout the event because, as you know, or perhaps you don't know, you can see us, but we can't see you. And so if you put a little remark in the chat room, we know you're there. We've made it a point all day to tell people that our local bookstores need your support now more than ever. I will post links in the chat session to two of our festival partners, Jabberwocky Bookshop in Newburyport and the Bookshop of Beverly Farms. We encourage you to purchase books from them unless, of course, you have another favorite independent bookseller you'd like to support. On screen with me is the wonderful poet Kiran Kapoor, who has been helping me put together the festival's poetry track for the past several years. So if you've noticed things getting better and better, now you know why. Kiran will introduce the hour's first reader. I am going to make myself disappear.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're with us. It is my great pleasure to introduce Rachel Dewaskin, in part because I know the poems you're about to hear are going to give you so much pleasure. Smart, fierce, funny, formally brilliant, the poems in two menus are wonderfully energetic and alive. The poet Robert Pinsky has described Dewaskin's work as possessing astonishing dash and verve. In addition to her debut book of poems, Two Menus, Dewaskin is the author of 6 books of fiction and nonfiction. She's the winner of the National Jewish Book Award, a Forewarned Magazine Book Award of the Year, as well as the American Library Association's Alex Award and its Sidney Taylor Book Award. She's on the core fiction faculty at the University of Chicago. Spinning between love and loss, childhood and womanhood, Chinese and English, the poems in Two Menus sketch a self made of shifting, colliding, overlapping parts. So much of the energy in these poems comes from their formal dexterity, especially from the unexpected placement of rhyme. In the poem Prison Questions, she writes, "She arrived on the arm of a guard, her face so soft it was hard not to look away. I tried to stay, both here and in those 20 years, to know what to think, ask, say." Dewaskin's poems remind us why we read poetry in the first place, for language that crackles with energy, performs sonic magic tricks, and blazes with precision, wisdom, and joy. Please welcome Rachel Dewaskin.
That was so moving and generous. And today has been so beautiful, from the breakfast to Natasha Trethewey's reading. And I'm honored and just very happy to be here, even virtually, and to be in this conversation about reading and writing and ethics. And of course, I'm delighted to have a chance to read with and to hear Charles Coe, whose poetry is remarkable. Kiran, thank you. Alfred, thank you. I'm going to read the first poem from Two Menus, my swirling red collection of poetry. And this poem is called The Blind Massage Parlor. The Blind Massage Parlor. Doctors Han and Wong run the Love Heart Massage in one of Beijing's 2.5 billion broken alleys. You'll recognize it by the red awning, Dr. Han says on the phone. And when I do, I wonder who told him. Later, on one immaculate bed in a row of 7, I feel Dr. Han's fist wedged between 2 innocent bones in my shoulder. He accompanies the soundtrack of my gasping with a simple statement: "We hated Titanic." I shift my weight on the straight white table and arch my eyebrows, a gesture Dr. Han overhears. He rests his right hand for one thoughtful moment on my spine and explains the story was stupid with its music. Your American Hollywood knows what about love? Nothing in that movie fit. I make shy eye contact with the client in a bed across the row. We are the only two here today. I think she loves Titanic, from the delicate way she lifts her neck to look at me, confused. I smile and replace my face into the massage table's dark space. Maybe Dr. Wong and Dr. Han also smile at each other over us. Because Dr. Han says, we've been married for 18 years. We feel what other people just see. Only after Dr. Wong, his wife of 18 years, giggles like a movie star in love, does he turn his attention and hands back to me. These days, we have a lot of foreign clients, he remarks. How do you say in English, does this hurt? So I'm always thinking when I'm writing about this beautiful thing James Baldwin said in an interview with the Paris Review in the 1980s. And he was talking about the difference as he sees it between preaching and writing. And he basically proposes that to preach, you have to arrive at the pulpit knowing something and ready to convey that conclusion to your congregants. And when you're writing, it's the opposite. That is to say that you write into what you don't know. And he says sometimes what you don't want to know, but something compels you to find out. I think a force both external to us and internal to us. And so my writing is always asking. I write into wonder and with wonder. And often that wonder is about the Chinese language. I'm going to read toward the end one Chinese translation. And this poem is called Two Menus. It's the title poem of the book, and it's about my own wonder and the kind of the slight grief of knowing that there are many things we can never know. For me, poetry is the best possible container for this problem and the best possible mode of expressing it. Two menus. Outside McDonald's downtown in Beijing, I board a bus bound for mountains with Xiao Dai, who carries equipment, asks why I have to be so headstrong. I say nothing. We belong to a climbing club, sheer rocks. It's better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox. Men mention wisdom whenever I disagree with them. I am roped in, belayed. If we fall, we all fall. My fingers are between a thin ridge, sideways gripping. I lean down to tell Xiao Dai, it's better to be neither chicken nor ox. He can't hear me. The rope swings, flicking sparks off cliffs. Translation is insurance. With just enough to cover what we must, we speak only where there's overlap, conserve our syllables, expressions, every move. The restaurant in Beijing called Bitterness and Happiness has two menus. The first of excess, second scarcity. We order flesh from one and from the other grass. The Chinese language has 77,000 characters Xiao Dai regards as evidence. When I ask of what, he is putting roots on my plate. Love, he says. My footing gets rocky around these matters of fact. A word for each affair. The waiter is back. Sometimes these questions are not about the intersections between language, but about things like love and illness. And this next poem is called Without. I'm trying in my middle years to be brave in my poems. And, you know, hearing Natasha Trethewey read today, I felt such a fierce sense of admiration for the willingness to say the thing directly. And that's kind of what I'm working toward. So, Without. Teach me to love without irony or violence, and I'll sing you a city with waves on the drive, like icy chimes. Listen. How many notes shatter as they reach the shore? Cold enough, water actually stacks. Get in with me, freeze, suffer, thaw. Let me love you without believing as I used to that we're safe, may last. Instead, let's peel. Strip raw, find what matters, move against each other and whatever this is. If I could dissolve the words I use to hide, I would write you hovering above me, tubes moving fluid from wounds I could not see without the lights in my mind shorting. They short here too, go black. And yet you looked, took those drains on, stripped them, tackled the project of my body by way of language, measured, counted milligram chances, wishing to statistic us straight back to the other oblivion. You stayed you after magicians sawed me open, sewed me back together. You kept all that we agreed on when we, stunningly young, said no matter what. Who knows what becomes? How vast, cold, hot, impossible, how much of our own blood? In plastic bulbs or moving through us, submerged, blue. Teach me to love the way you do. White tape, clean gauze. Let me see endless, see so many hazy days now clearing. Now the lake is ice again, now winter. Frozen waves are chipping at each other, sharp and gray. But high up, we are dancing, reassembled, brave because surprise keeps us our minds and marrow lit, alive. This next poem is called Horse Fair. Horse Fair. Sky turned circus, dim 5. Night rides opened, horses draped with ribbons, lined up, eyes flashing moonlight. They were in a contest our silly pony always lost. Freedom made us grave, yet let us ride the Ferris wheel, neon veins alit, sit high atop shellacked pink backs of ponies on a carousel. The one I chose posed in a scream, Victoria's head thrown back with force enough to bear square painted teeth. My hands around his neck, I rode in circles until spots formed in my vision and we landed on fact. A plastic horse outlasts us. We will, he shines. We left the grounds each year at midnight, sticky shreds of cotton candy on us, and behold, the marks of our small fingers everywhere. Safely elsewhere, present now, I wonder, which of those ponies did stay put? In pitch night, maybe mine raged away, tore off his pole, still twisting up and up, no longer through his stomach, out his back, no fear. Imagine, no fear. Now I've made it, so it happened. Here. This is the translation I mentioned earlier, and it's a translation of Li Bai's poem, Parting at Chang'an, which of course Ezra Pound once translated. And I had the occasion to look at the Chinese carefully when I was teaching it a couple years ago at UChicago in a class called Not My Native Language. And I was very interested in the voice of the teenage narrator at the center of the poem, and I decided to try to translate it myself. So this is the result of that effort, Parting at Chang'an by Li Bai. My hair still in bangs, I played outside the front gate, picking flowers. You came by, high on a bamboo hobby horse, then sat playing with our green plums. We lived like this together in Chang'an, 2 little ones, no jealousy, no distrust. At 14, I married you. So shy, my face never opened up. I just lowered my head and watched the dark wall. You called to me 1,000 times, but I never answered your call. At 15, I answered. Looked up, unfurrowed, wanted to mingle together, even past our mortal days, wanted forever, knew we would cling faithfully to our moorings. So why climb the watchtower looking for you? But at 16, you left. You went far away to Yanyu Dui, where churning waters crash the rocky shores. For 5 months now, no you. All of nature echoes the gibbons, crying out in sorrow. Outside our gate, your footprints fill with moss, each step too deep to be erased. Too early, leaves fall in rough autumn wind. It's only August, yet the butterflies lose color. Still, they fly in pairs to the Western garden as I pale too, aging. They hurt me so much sitting here. If you are on your way, please send word when. If you have passed the fast currents of the Yangtze, I will think nothing of the distance. I'll come all the way to Changfengsha to meet you again. I'm going to read 2 sonnets, which I wrote as an accompaniment to a classical concert given by my friend Yuanqing Yu, who's a violinist for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And I thought of these because of the intersections in Charles's work between music and meter and the magic of that alchemy. This is called From Your Mama at First. This was a Mother's Day program in Chicago a couple of years ago. From your mama at first. Here, the sweet sweep and scope of one body becomes another. Bright change underway already. Say you'll be my baby. Say elbow, kneecap, eyes, and spine. Come and play a game of antique, stunning love. Your ways will be new rules. Our own sudden always. Imaginable only once this daze takes over, only after your pace, craze, the milk life, words unmoored, contradiction everywhere. Light, power. Which prediction could have guessed your slipping, lisping diction, your fantastic tempers, predilection list, penguins, kissing, each bubble popping. Such stock you teach me to take, unstopping. And this is the second poem in that sequence. I'll only read 2. This is called Next Up. Daisy chain of childhood days, the cadence of rain, spring, hours of our rocking dance. I still move side to side all these years since on train platforms, at streetlights, every chance a memory of carrying you. Window on 113th, the fire trucks below, tiny men running like toys, each hero you liked to name, each dog too, baby, row of flowers, biblical, St. John's, fountain of mythical creatures, carved stone mountains, sun atop it, real peacocks. Once when you were 4, the white one leaped, screamed again and again from a tree. You said maybe it lost its mother, a warning to me. I'm going to read one more poem from Two Menus, which is the final poem in the collection, and then I'm going to read one recent sonnet. Okay, this is the final poem, and it's called Two, T-O-O, Two. Sing a song of sense, this surface of the lake, roiling water, lolling cusp of summer, maybe dawning wonder we are late to join. Chorus of us, women, spackled, rageful, racked, we sparkle. Undercurrents of unutterable language coming up, come up. From buried, sunk, from fear. Link words, make stable something here. When we don't, when we do, when this, when shut up, when beat wordless, when we're silent with what's senseless, bound toward dirt, erase, diminished. When we erase to sleep, swim, cope. When we learn how to choke down rage, pain, want. When not allowed to name, when eating failure, when we breathe or speak, when daring, flawed, disgusting, or averting to, when to, then flee it. Flee. Come with us. Ride this grief. Ride pride to some reach, safe from eating our own, from hunting what we never meant to be. Mean it. Don't pack words in your furious marrow. Shout out what we made. Language, all the babies, hell, ourselves. Okay, I'm going to read one recent sonnet. I've been writing exclusively sonnets during quarantine. I'm finding fiction a difficult predicament since I don't have a steady foothold in reality anymore, since reality has become somewhat unrecognizable. I find the container of the sonnet to be relaxing, or there's a certainty to it. As we were talking about this morning at breakfast, or I was listening, but the poets were discussing fruitfully the way in which poems offer a chance to contain what's most difficult and uncontainable. I have even found the way that iambic pentameter mimics natural speech to be reassuring in this moment. So this is a poem about this moment and about my own my own off balance problem. It's called These Days I Keep Falling. These days I keep falling. I keep falling. Slipped on the rocks in a river and caught my left pinky. Landing, tore bone away, avulsion. Thought it would heal, was wrong, did not. I am not distraught though. Change is falling. Change this year has taught me, kick harder in sleep. Remember, falling may prepare us to fall harder, faster, be broken. Okay, I won't despair. Blading uphill, I slipped and cracked a rib right where the incline sharpened. Errant twig or seed pod there, lodged in my wheel, twisted, flipped me over, numb with shock. I'm not distraught. This fight is different from the one I used to have with my body, young. I've become myself descending, protective of what I opposed. Some version I am, one I cannot save, someone who falls all the time into danger, repose, love with you. I'm going to end there, and I can't wait to hear Charles read. Thank you again for having me and for the beautiful welcome.
Rachel, what a place of this is. Of course, this is the place to introduce a sonnet. Because this might be the capital, the world capital of sonnet making, because of the powwows living here. You gave us a little extra time here. You're certain that you don't want to, if you have anything else you'd like to add, but you want to do a little encore before we bring Charles on?
I would be happy to. I never want to go even 30 seconds over, but maybe I'll read the poem that Kieran quoted from in her introduction.
Sounds good.
Does that sound okay? All right. I'm going to read one more, and then I wanted to oxygenate the second half and not push the boundaries of our time. This is called Prison Questions. Again, always with questions for me. Prison questions. To see your brother's mother in jail, we drove the same highway she had. 1981, 2001, slow wove a tangle of side streets while you told me rules. But the guards made me take my pants off at security anyway, because metal buttons, because I had gotten the earrings, keys, rings, coins, but forgotten my place. Was I proud? Sweatpants up to my neck, yet the detector tantrumed. Next, my shoes, socks, shirt. The tall one asked about my bra. A wire? 1981. Your brother's mother came by way of what? 20 years ago. Remind me what remorse and terror. My bra was wireless, but I shed it. The jacket they gave me wouldn't shut. I clutched for buttons, tried to keep my face still. Try even now for calm. Some more alarms, one shrill cry, a child in the line of women behind me. Nothing left to peel, they shrugged me past, stripped a grandma next. Banging steel gates, black lights revealed invisible marks we could feel on our hands, and there we were. Cement walls, one small TV screen, two books, a poster, read, stuffed bear. A vending machine spit out shiny packages of popcorn. She arrived on the arm of a guard, her face so soft it was hard not to look away. I tried to stay both here and in those 20 years, to know what to think, ask, say, about decades gone, the meaning, men shot, many families in this maw forever devastated. This was not an intersection I'd expected. She held her hand out, fragile, small, bones wrapped up in parchment, holding all we'd heard and wondered. We shook, hugging forbidden, and she recited for me a poem she'd written at 60 about you three. Your childhood's gone. It asked what men you'd turned out to be. I didn't know much about it myself. She asked warm questions, trying to see her son in your family and you now in mine. Over the table, how many lives passed so far away, some rippling out. When we got snacks, she was embarrassed I had to pay. Peanut M&Ms, potato chips, a Coke, sad salad, plastic wrapped. I tried to ask back, but language was elastic, stretching, snapping, never meaning what I wanted to mean. What did I mean to ask? Ask anything, she offered. I'll try now. Of what apologies and places are we made? What terrifying Americas hadn't I heard of? Why? Because we need a different listening? I hear right now, decades later, the song a man nearby was singing to his baby girl. Low enough, I could not make words out then, and so slow, I struggled to hear a landing, just one soft rhyme. I wanted to ask your brother's mother for an ending, but our time was up. How calmly that man sang, as if time were free or adequate, as if notes, hope, somewhere, some answer. Thank you.
Brava, Rachel, nice encore. A terrific reading all the way through. You know, you are not the first person I've heard having listened to Natasha Trethewey accuse herself of being less than courageous in your poetry, but you can't get much more courageous than translating that poem that was so famously translated by Ezra Pound. And you gotta say, you certainly did sound, you did capture that young person's voice better than he did. I won't tell him. So now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Charles Coe. And it is, I mean, we love having Charles Coe come to town. We had wanted him to sing for us, sing as part of our Melopea this evening, but then the COVID kind of put nix to that plan. In the next to last poem in Charles Coe's most recent collection, Memento Mori, he pictures himself as this white-haired ghost, brimming with after-the-fact wisdom, hopping up and down on one leg to get your attention, waving my arms and shouting. The description works in the context of the poem where he is trying to communicate with his younger self. But Charles Coe, the poet, is precisely the opposite of the man described here. He never calls attention to himself in his poems. The voice in Coe's poetry expresses a consciousness, not a self-consciousness. Not the I, but what the eye sees is the important thing. Often he focuses so intently on his subject that he seems to enter into it, leaving himself behind. The appearance of an Australian tribesman on the Red Line in Boston, dressed only in a breechcloth, works like a hallucinogen, causing a sequence of vivid memories to pass through his mind, as though he'd entered the Aborigines' dream time. From the sound of a woman's laughter heard on a live jazz recording made a half-century ago, he is able to reconstruct an entire nightclub and the lives of everyone in it. Hearing a Haitian Creole sermon on the radio, he imagines a lost soul pulled to the side of the road, listening to the same station, surrendering grief and fear and guilt in a torrent of tears. Coe's empathy is such, it seems, not merely the ability to feel the emotions of others, but the inability not to feel them. In another poem set in the plaza outside a subway stop, Coe sees a young woman shyly accept a young man's invitation to dance. I was tempted to stop and watch, he writes, but some flowers bruise when touched, so I just kept walking. Everywhere in Coe's poetry, we find evidence of the poet's willingness to negate himself, to fade from the scene he is observing, even to look away, lest his glance have the wrong effect on what is taking place. Setting his own slights and injuries aside, he makes room for empathy even toward those who might harbor ill will toward him. In one of his delightfully long-titled poems, For the Ancient Boston Bar with Neon Shamrocks in the Windows, recently departed. So the title is For the Ancient Boston Bar with Neon Shamrocks in the Windows, recently departed. Coe describes a warm, the warm Irish welcome he most certainly did not receive upon entering the bar to use the payphone years ago. Anyone there might have been delighted to crack my skull. But when the gathering place of those would-be enemies is closed down and turned into a trendy night spot, he can't help but feel for them. Loss makes brothers of us all, he writes. It's a great pleasure to present to you, Charles Coe. You're in for a treat.
Alfred, thank you for that incredible introduction. So thank you, and Karen, thank you. I'm going to start off with Inauguration Day, 2021. Like the world's worst party guest, you finally stumble out the door, kicking a table over in a final gesture of contempt, sending shrimp cocktail and grandma's beloved punch bowl crashing, eggnogs and crustaceans and shards of 100-year-old crystal spread across the living room floor. There is no accounting for the carnage in your wake. Some of what you have taken will never be returned. Some of what you have broken will never be fixed. Yet we are here still, exhausted, but resolved to rebuild and reclaim, gathering ourselves and rolling up our sleeves as the light of a new day shines through our broken windows. I'm going to read 3 poems I wrote during this last year. It seems that in some parts of the world, at least, we're slowly crawling out of a long, dark tunnel. I wrote these 3 poems when we are just crawling into that tunnel. This first is love in the time of Corona, with apologies to Gabriel Garcia Marquez. In ancient Greece, men shook hands as a demonstration of good faith to show they weren't armed. In these days of fever and fear, we keep our distance. Resist the timeless call of flesh to flesh, but the time will come again to take the stranger's hand, embrace a friend, share a kiss. Until then, our cries for human touch are dispatches from separate battlefields, tied to passenger pigeons we release into the restless night. I suspect we have some dog lovers collected here today. There are dog lovers everywhere, dog lovers and cat lovers. You can love both. It is possible. I don't have a pet, but if I did, I'd probably be a cat person. It's essentially a maintenance issue, you know, less maintenance is involved. But this is for the dog lovers. Something on the wind. A car waiting at the red light has a dog with head stuck out the back window, tongue hanging, snout twitching, beguiled by some intriguing smell. Now, the average dog nose is a million times more sensitive than humans. A bloodhound's nose, 100 million times. Now, this dog's a mutt, not a bloodhound. Genetic fruit salad, a United Nations of dog. But it has a fine nose and appears unconcerned about its lack of pedigree, focused instead on whatever it's sniffing. And it occurs to me there might not be a more contented creature on the planet than a dog with head stuck out a car window. The light turns green, the dog moves on to new olfactory adventures, and I wonder what it smelled here, what it smelled that I could never detect with this feeble human nose, even if that nose weren't covered by the mask I'm hoping will protect me from something on the wind. One of the things I've missed most, not most, but one of the things I have missed this last year plus, is just meeting some friends, going out for dinner, or having people to my house for dinner. Uh, this past Monday was 2 weeks after my second shot. So I'm looking forward to discreet little indoor gatherings with vaccinated friends who continue to wear their masks in public. Um, but again, this poem was written last spring when there wasn't going to be none of that happening for a while. This is communion. Do you remember those times when we'd all meet at some favorite restaurant, stepping in from the cold, breathing clouds of garlic, shrugging off coats for the welcoming hugs? We'd examine the menu with the care of archaeologists blowing dust off a newly discovered Sanskrit tablet. And we'd sit so close, touching sometimes, everybody yakking at once, pausing to join in a ragged chorus of happy birthday drifting over from another table. And finally, as our ravaged plates made their way back to the kitchen, sometimes we'd pose for a picture taken on someone's phone by an indulgent server, arms wrapped around each other, grinning like high school kids at graduation. Now, those of us who live alone search cookbooks and computers for dishes we make for one, post pictures of our creations online, not to brag, but to share communion the only way we can. Now, Rachel was talking about sonnets reading sonnets. And I've written one sonnet that's in my most recent book. This is Memento Mori, that's that. And I had this experience some years ago that the first time I had it, I'm like, what? And then I started having it more frequently and realized I got to write a poem about that. So I started writing it in my usual way, which is blank verse, free verse, although I do work in forms occasionally. But I was trying to do a blank verse approach to this poem, and it just wasn't working. And I realized it needs to be a sonnet. And so I boned up a bit on the form and wrote this. This is sonnet for the young woman who offered me her seat on the train. Your smile illuminates the gloomy morn as sunshine warms a chilly mountain lake. Before me sits a beauty not yet born when decades trailed already in my wake. You stir as if to rise and yield your place. But I return your smile and shake my head while hoping in the moment that my face will show no hint of all the thoughts unsaid. I could have sung your mother lullabies, yet still a young man lingers in my heart who once delighted in a young girl's sighs. The time has passed for him to play that part. He read his lines upon a perfumed stage, but as they will, the years have turned the page. So giving the sonnet some love. We'll give the sonnet some love today. Uh, I I am also a singer, and I play the didgeridoo and teach the didgeridoo. And a lot of my work is informed by music. And so I'm going to read some poems that talk about music. And I think Alfred referred to this one. This is A Woman's Laughter. On a recording of the Bill Evans Trio live at the Village Vanguard, late June 1961, during a slow humming version of I Love You, Porgy, at the quietest moment, in the background, soft but clear, a woman's laughter. At first, the sound seems jarring, even sacrilegious. But then again, a jazz club's not a concert hall. Listeners in polite rows, knees together, waiting to cough in the space between movements. Jazz is cash registers and clinking glasses and chairs scraping the floor. And besides, it's a pleasant laugh, full of promise. Easy to see her hand reach out to rest on her companion's arm. Easy to catch the whiff of lilac or lavender. Always so many worlds within worlds. In one world, a man who follows Evans from gig to gig sits at the bar alone, transfixed, ice melting in a forgotten drink. In one world, the bartender counts his cash while dreaming of the waitress's embrace. In one world, a woman's laughter. In one world, Evans leans over the keys, oblivious to all but the slow heartbeat bass, the splash of brushes on cymbal and snare, fingers poised for what seems like forever before they settle gently on the final chord. When I was a kid, I went to parochial school, all Catholic nuns and priests, all Black kids. It was a missionary school. I went to a missionary school in Indianapolis, Indiana, St. Bridget's. But I played violin when I was a kid, and I loved it, and I loved listening to classical music. And Um, I saved up my money from selling newspapers and bought a ticket to see Isaac Stern play at Indianapolis, at Clues Hall in Indianapolis. So this is a symphony of crickets. I owned one suit as a child, a reddish brown wide well corduroy number with red and gold paisley fake silk lining that one Christmas my mother intentionally purchased 2 sizes too big. You'll grow into it, she replied to my whined objections. It was made of cheap, heavy fabric that bent only grudgingly at elbows and knees. I was Frankenstein's monster, stomping stiff-legged through the forest, chased by torch-wielding villagers and their determined, unsympathetic bloodhounds. And the pants rubbed with humiliating ferocity. I was a walking symphony of crickets. I wore my suit the day in 8th grade. I took 2 buses alone to hear Isaac Stern perform with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. I was studying violin and would spend hours at the library, headphones on, listening to his records. I'd saved enough for my paper route to buy a ticket. And when I got to the hall, I climbed to my seat high in back of the balcony, one brown face awash in a sea of white, in my little cheap suit, listening to the maestro, my crickets and I, transfixed in silence. There's a fun little story about that poem. I got a letter a year or so ago from Isaac Stern's widow. Someone had shown her that poem, and the letter was very kind, and so I sent her. I hand lettered a copy of the poem and framed it and mailed it to her, and now it's sitting on her office wall, and that makes me very happy. That doesn't happen too often. Oh, this is one, Rachel, I'll dedicate this one to you because I spent some time in Chicago back in the 70s doing some music, and I loved Chicago. It's a great city. It's a great city. You just have to be careful where you walk sometimes at night. I was living in Hyde Park at the time. So, you know, your eyes, you're like one of those frogs, the eyes go in different directions. But there are a lot of places in Massachusetts where that's the case as well. So anyway, this is When a White Boy Plays the Blues. A white boy who plays the blues for a Black audience is like a brother pulled over for driving while Black, an immediate object of suspicion. When a particular tall, skinny white boy took the stand on a particular Chicago summer night in a particular neighborhood club with cheesy, splintered fake wood paneling and sputtering neon beer sign in the window, 2 of the letters burnt out. In this joint where no fresh-faced, logo-covered tourist lined up outside for a taste of blues Disneyland, the brothers waited with folded arms to see what he could do. We didn't care about chops. Any pimply-faced first-year conservatory student can play rings around muddy waters. We were listening not for notes, but for music. And if he turned out to be a pretender, we were looking for clues to identify the specific nature of the crime. But when he started playing, we were surprised. The notes that poured from his guitar and throat weren't dazzling, but they were true. Water from some well we couldn't find on the map, but we recognized the taste. So he clapped after his first tune and he glanced at his drummer with pleasure and relief. As the set went on and he got looser, folks started to clap and grin. The waitress at the bar did a little 2-step shuffle while she waited for a tray. Some guy with a gold tooth played percussion on a beer bottle with his car keys. The verdict was in. It was clear we all belonged in this place on this hot night with our cold beers, that we were all in our own ways outsiders together, faces pressed to the glass of the American dream. I'm going to read one dedicated to Chadwick Boseman, the late, great Chadwick Boseman, who was in the fantastic movie Get On Up, a biopic about James Brown. I left the theater thinking this is the best movie I've seen all year. There'll be a bucket full of Oscar nominations. There was not one. And if that movie had been made after the Black Panther, when Chadwick Boseman was Chadwick Boseman, I think that would have been different. But anyway, this poem was written in 1998, and it also happens to be called Get On Up. Can anybody else here say that in the summer of 1967, when they were 14 years old, their mama took them to a James Brown concert? Did you walk alongside her through the gates of a minor league ballpark on a hot, cloudless Indiana night when the moon shone like a spotlight on that rough wooden stage? Was anybody else here sitting beside their mama on them hard benches when James's band, the famous Flames, came out to lay down a red carpet of funk and the announcer whipped that crowd like a bowl of black cream till the godfather of soul finally skated on stage like a water bug, telling everybody about his brand new bag? If your mama yelled like everybody else, then let it not be told. Let everybody know how she clapped her hands raw as James flew back and forth across the stage, sweat and grease from his conked up hair pouring down the front of his ruffled shirt, purple satin jacket ripped off and tossed aside. Let everybody know how she stomped her feet like a dog. Lonnie grabbed that mic and begged for just one more chance. Baby, baby, please. And then when he finally rose, shaking and spent, and somebody tossed a robe over his shoulders, helped him trudge off stage, did your mama scream when he suddenly froze in his tracks, as if struck by the Holy Ghost, pulled away from that helper, tossed the robe aside and ran back into the spotlight? And is there anybody else whose mama popped out of her seat like a piece of toast when the band scratched out the opening licks of "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud"? And did she scream herself hoarse, shouting out the chorus, while James, wearing a coast-to-coast grin, held his mic aloft to gather in the music of the crowd? Was your mama there? Then stand up and testify. Get on up and shout it out. Thank you all.
Well, now, did I tell you it was going to be a treat? My crickets and I have been transfixed in silence for this whole, but not quite silent. I've been laughing. That was great. That was great. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. I so wish you were going to be part of our Melopia tonight, but some other time.
Another time.
Yeah.
And Rachel, thank you so much. It was a gas working with you. You rock.
You really did.
That was such a joy. I loved every minute of your reading. Thank you. And thank you for having me. And thank you for dedicating that powerful poem about the faces pressed up against the glass of the American dream to me. I will cherish that.
All right, I'm going to say goodbye and we're all going to disappear. It was great to see you.
Peace to everybody. Stay healthy.